Oh,
Hey, Mark.
the battle of the backdrops.
Well, I saw yours first, so I only naturally had
Oh,
to
quite
do
right.
this.
Absolutely. I think any podcast that doesn't do that is missing out.
Hello, Mark.
Hi, good to see you.
As someone, I think Diane from Maine said, I must introduce the guest. So, joining us today on Know Your Enemy, the
Oh, careful.
Walsall Walsall edition. Is that okay? The
Yeah,
Walsall
Walsall,
edition is Disney's own Mark Griffiths.
son of Walt.
So
Thank you very much.
yeah, Walt, Mark Walt.
Yes, that's it.
Well, today we're looking at Walsall, the history, getting a good background information that we can from the historian, the Library of Alexandria himself of Wrexham. Uh, First and foremost, who is Walsall FC?
Well, they have a long history, not as long as ours, because barely anyone has a history as long as ours. But they were founded about 25 years after us, and they managed to jump on the early football bandwagon more successfully than us, because when they formed the football league about 5 years after they were founded, they actually were one of the founder members of the second division. So whereas Wrexham joined the football league in 1921, having played about 35 years of regional league football, Walsall jumped right into the second division when it was formed and lasted a year, I think I'm right in saying, and then got kicked out, but then came back in again. So they've been, sort of a fixture in serious competitive league football in Britain from the outset, but they've never really been a team that has hit the heights. That second level that they were put into, that's the limit of where they've got. They traditionally are a team around the same level as Wrexham, Division 3, Division 4, the third and fourth tiers. They were founded initially because two quite old clubs, even older than them, merged, and they were known as Walsall Swifts for a while. Um, I can only assume there are a lot of Swifts around there. Their badge is a Swift, the bird. Their nickname is the Saddlers, though, because apparently it's not well known for saddle making in Walsall. Well,
Still, or
Walsall is, sorry,
is it still known for saddle making?
not that I'm aware of. No, it's very industrial. It essentially, it's to the west. Well, it's sort of west of Birmingham. Birmingham's the second biggest city in England. Birmingham's right slap bang in the middle of England, pretty much in the Midlands, as it's called. And Walsall is like just to the west of that. But essentially, there's a lot of conurbations around there, and they all just merge into each other. So Walsall is not Birmingham, but if you walked from Walsall to Birmingham, you wouldn't see any countryside.
Mm.
So it's very heavily industrialized. They they take advantage of that because the M6 goes right past their ground, right past it, and they're obviously no fools because their stadium is it really stands out. They built a new stand at the stadium. It was a bit higher. It felt to me just to make sure they were in your face as you're driving past, and they have a big electronic advertising board so that when you're driving, you're constantly getting distracted by this bright changing image from miles off. It's so they're quite smart like that. They started having car boot sales, which are sort of a bit of niche phenomenon in Britain, really, where on a Sunday morning people will pay to park their cars up, and then a bit like a garage sale in the States, I guess, and then you sell out the back of your cars. And they used to have a massive one, and sort of finding innovative ways to make money for the club. So they're quite smart in that respect. That region there that all runs into each other to the west of Birmingham is called the Black Country because it was also a major area in the start of the Industrial Revolution and was often covered in soot and pollution. So it's called the Black Country for that reason. And it's sort of, Walsall, West Bromwich. Some people would say Wolverhampton as well. Some people don't, and nobody really totally agrees. It's not like a set area. It's like a sort of folklore region. but they're very proud of people coming from the Black Country, which means you can't understand a word they're saying, because they have the most remarkable dialect. Well, not all of them, but the most amazing dialect and thick accent. It's like a Birmingham accent, but it's exaggerated. And Walsall used to, I'd love it if they started doing it again now, I don't know. They used to have a column. It was a joke column in the football club's programme in Black Country dialect. And it was a joy. I mean, it was a jokey thing, you know? But yeah, so I'll embarrass myself by attempting it a bit, but it's sort of really, really sort of exaggerated Birmingham accent, a bit like that, and it can get very, very thick and very hard to understand. So, well, I slipped over it then a bit, but yeah, it's quite interesting when they really talk quickly. Some people, it's quite hard to follow them. I'll be honest with you.
And I think at this point in time, I should show you the clip of the accent that I found,
and
then go ahead and play it for you.
Please do.
So in the Black Country, they've got proper, like, Dudley. They sort of talk like that. I got no neck and no future.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, I'll try to do the whole thing in the Birmingham accents, but I've probably messed it up completely. Well, no, West Country. So Birmingham accent's a bit like that. But then
sing-songy,
exaggerated in the Black Country.
Another follow-up question: you were saying that Walsall got kicked out of Division 2. Does that mean they were relegated, or they were literally kicked out?
Kicked out, but it may be not quite as dramatic as that sounds. The old system used to be that the bottom division, you'd have to apply for re-election. So essentially, or at the end of a season, all the other clubs would vote on whether the bottom team's allowed to stay in. And as time went on, because that wasn't dropped until the late 1980s, believe it or not. Wow. So it lasted for about 100 years. As time went on, maybe it became a bit more of a tight-knit club. Rochdale's finished bottom of the 4th division, but I don't want to vote them out because they have nice pies in the boardroom. So, we're not voting them out, So it became rare for clubs to be voted out. But I think earlier on, it wasn't quite the same as that. There may be a lot of politics as well in the fact that there was quite a lot, I think, of regional rivalry in the early days of football in terms of getting certain neighbours on board. So maybe that plays a part in it as well. But yeah, Walsall were voted out. But then were voted straight back in. They only spent one season in a regional league and then applied again. So yeah, hard to believe, but what you've been suffering through, the whole Wrexham trying to get back in the Football League, used to be, like I said, re-election. So the bottom 4 teams, this is during my lifetimes, I think pretty much from the Second World War till the late 80s, the bottom 4 teams in the 4th tier would all have to apply for re-election. And it would generally be waved through, the best teams in a non-league would also apply to be voted in. And yeah, it was pretty much a formality. Wrexham finished bottom of the league in 1966, had to go for re-election. Yeah, fine. We stayed in.
Oh, wow.
But then they brought in automatic relegation at the end of the 80s. Just one up, one down then, not even the second place that we were scrapping over. So yes, it's which is obviously fairer, but not as fair as having 3 or 4 places up or down. But yeah, it used to be just a vote a vote amongst your friends and peers. So yeah, you can tell that.
Just the owners that are voting. It's not the people. Okay.
No. Oh, sorry, I should have made that clear. No, it's just the owner of each club. So there'd be 92 clubs in the Football League in those days because the Premier League hadn't broken away, and each one has one vote. And that's that. So
your friends aren't going to vote you out.
You would expect not, wouldn't you?
You're rubbing elbows with them, and yeah.
I mean, very occasionally teams dropped out, but it was an old boys' club, wasn't it? Who's going to get rid of their mates? And I'm trying to think now. I mean, Aldershot dropped out, but that was because of financial problems. And then teams like Southport and Barrow, they dropped out. Like so before I was watching football because I was too young, or before I was born. I'm not sure the reasons for those. I think they may have been genuinely voted out, but I'd have to double check that. And Altrincham did have massive financial problems as well. So And it's nice to see that, two of the three are back in there, and Southport sort of yo-yo between the National League and the league below. So it's good to see they've got themselves back somewhere,
Yeah, and to that point, Walsall's history, are you aware of how high they've ever been in the football league?
That second level is the best they've been to, and they haven't spent all that long there. They're certainly traditional in terms of longevity, but I wouldn't say they've made a huge scratch in the history of British football as such. I don't mean that to sound disparaging, but they've never got. I remember they got to the semi-finals of what we now call the Carabao Cup in the 80s, and that was a major surprise. And they played Liverpool over 2 legs. So this was the early 80s. Liverpool in the early 80s were a phenomenon, and so Walsall didn't get to the final. Most thing I remember about that was that it was in their old ground, because this ground they're at now, they must have gone into about 20 years ago, something like that. But their old ground was very old-fashioned, and a wall collapsed. Nobody got hurt or badly hurt, but a wall collapsed during the League Cup semi-final. Just the crowds were packed in, and the wall gave way and fell onto the pitch. No, but like I said, I don't think anyone was hurt, thankfully. But that's the main thing I recall about that as a sort of teenager, thinking, what? So the wall fell down. We've seen that happen at Wealdstone with Wrexham 2 seasons ago now. So
was the 80s just a time of where it was the right time in history? The Venn diagram overlay of clubs have been around for 100 years now, and so stadiums have been around for 100 years. So it's this point where wood's giving way, construction's giving way, you have more people there or on the grounds, and because there was the Hillsborough disaster. So the 80s, isn't that when they made the ruling on the upper level teams that they had to redo their stadiums?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's complex though, so not just going to go into the long weeds. I think I might be escaping from Shawshank and hiding in a irrigation ditch. The football grounds were getting more and more antiquated, as you quite rightly say, because these are all traditional clubs who are all, roughly 100 years old. And Hillsborough, I mean, ironically, Hillsborough sparks all those changes and sparks a lot of new builds of grounds. Although, to be frank, it wasn't caused by the stadium. I mean, Hillsborough, where it happened, it was still Sheffield Wednesday's ground, and it's big and impressive. It's a bit antiquated, but it was. And don't worry about this because it's been proven in court. It was police error that caused that, and I won't go into the whole scandal afterwards, but the cover-up was utterly horrific. And if anyone's interested, there's loads of places to look, and your jaw will drop when you see what happened that day. It was a terrible, terrible thing. But that was actually due to, not to cramped, poor conditions. It was due to the police opening the gates and letting people without tickets crowd into certain areas until they started to be crushed, which is horrendous. But a lot of grounds were totally inadequate. The disaster 4 years earlier at Heysel, Belgian National Stadium, which was again a Liverpool game, the Champions League equivalent cup final, Liverpool against Juventus. And I think it's 38 Juventus fans were killed in violence on the terrace. But the reason they were killed was because there was a surge of people running, and they got pushed against the wall, and the entire wall fell down. And there were a lot of people before the disaster happened saying this stadium is not fit for a big football match. It's falling to pieces. So that was a scandal that rebounded on UEFA as well, really. But yeah, so in 1989 there was an inquiry into the Hillsborough disaster, which said that all seating stadia are safer, and so in the top leagues you had to have only all-seater stadium. You couldn't have standing areas, and the lower divisions that was allowed to slide. Although later on it was made a rule by FIFA. So all international football matches, you're not supposed to be able to stand. That's why Wrexham, you've seen, have consulted the fans about having safe seating on the Kop. So seating that you can convert. So for a Wrexham game, you can stand, and then for an international game, they'll convert it into seating. And I've been on a few safe seating stands, and they're good. They work. it's dangerous standing in a seated area. So it's good, I think, that you can have this option. But so lots of clubs, and Walsall were one of the earlier ones, relocated their grounds. So they stayed within Walsall, but they built this impressive new ground. There's pros and cons to it. You're going to get better facilities, but on the other hand, you lose your history, if you will. I mean, Everton this season having their last season at Goodison Park. Now, Goodison Park has been around since the 19th century. And I mean, I can tell you from a football fan, watching Everton point of view, it's a massive part of their heritage. And in some ways, it's a massive wrench for them to leave. But the other part of me says, I've been to Gate, it's only an hour from here. I've been to plenty of games at Goodison Park. And, it's a shabby thing. It's really antiquated. I mean, for example, just something which might really surprise you. They sell tickets with a restricted view. And they have to say they're restricted view, but these buildings were built over 100 years ago, and there are plenty of places where there's a pillar in the way, or you're back in some little nook of the stand and you can't see one end of the pitch properly. While they'll advertise them as restricted view, it's sort of hard to imagine in 2023 that you could pay a good chunk of money to watch a football match when maybe you can't see one of the penalty areas.
Exactly. I mean, here in Arizona, there's a spot in the Cardinal Stadium, and I think it sits something ridiculous, like, I don't know, 80,000 or so. I don't know what the number is. There's some nice nosebleed seats that you can buy right by some trussing. The roof opens and closes, and there's a mechanism for that. And if you're sitting up high enough in a corner, you have an obstructed view. Some of those seats, you can't sit where you're sitting and see the game. You have to do one of these numbers if you want to see it. And and they sell those tickets. People will, it's an open seat, somebody's going to buy the ticket so they can be at the game.
I remember as a little kid, one of the first away games I went to was at Bolton, which is up the other side of Manchester. And they had a very peculiar grounds because they had financial problems. So they sold one of the stands to a supermarket. So behind one goal was just the outer wall round the back of a supermarket. And obviously no fans can go behind the goal. And then the rest of it was really antiquated. I remember there was a big girder in front of me, and I had to sort of look round the girder to see half the pitch. Preston used to have, I mean, if you look at old football stands, you'll see, I mean, to be fair, it's technology. Hillsborough was the first ground to have a cantilever roof. So, actually there's no need for pillars to support it. Preston, I remember going to there, and there were so many pillars on their main stand. It was astonishing. There was a whole row of them. And really, they were close together. I mean, it was ludicrous. Nobody had an uninterrupted view. And then I seem to remember, because this is going back to the early 80s, there were also pillars inside the stand as well to hold up the roof.
Wow.
It was just crazy. It was crazy.
That is insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
I couldn't imagine fighting for a ticket as hard as Wrexham tickets are to get now, and then having an obstructed view and just missing an iconic play or a crucial part of the game because the ball or the player is moved right behind a pillar. That would get under my skin for sure.
Still happens. I mean, but on a less spectacular sort of level, if you will. You still have grounds that have the old grounds of pillars, and you have to shift your head around. You'd be not that close to them, perhaps, but you sometimes have to have a sneaky look at whether you can see the goal and decide you'll let your co-commentator sit there, if you know what I mean. Hope Shane and Bill aren't listening. But I remember, I mean, some grounds are still like that. Liverpool rebuilding one of their stands, and my son and I were in a Champions League game there about 4 or 5 years ago, and we were in the bottom tier, the very back row, and you can't see the pitch really from there. It was astonishing. And what we did was, I may sound like I'm exaggerating here. I swear to you I'm not. What we did is we managed to just about see the game because there was some sort of pipe running under the roof above us. And the roof was so low, we could touch the roof easily. So we grabbed hold of the pipe and spent the whole game hanging onto it with our feet on, because all the fans stand up. Seats, but they all stand up. So the seats are tilted up, and the metal support, the metal supports go up on the back of a seat.
Yeah.
But they only go up so far, don't they? And then there's like the pivots where the plastic bit goes.
Mhm.
So we were basically holding onto there and standing on the metal supports of the seat in front of us. And that sort of allowed, but it was constantly moving all the time. So we were constantly having to readjust that because the ball's in a different place or because
Oh,
my
wow.
arms were absolutely killing me.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was astonishing. And we had tickets for those seats for all the Champions League games for Liverpool that season. So as you can imagine, I got on the phone the next day. And actually, to be fair, they relocated me because, it's supposed to be a sellout. But somehow we managed to get better seats. So we saw Liverpool famously come back from 3-0 down to beat Barcelona, one of the great Champions League nights. And we were in a great spot to watch it because I phoned up and complained and said, you can't really charge me for those tickets, mate. So
Yeah, my arms don't work.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
They don't move beyond this now for the next
I
48
look like
hours.
I've been tortured in the Tudor era. My arms have been stretched.
On a stretch. Yeah. You were quartered. Yeah.
Much better goalkeeper now. I can stay in the line and still catch crosses on the edge of the area.
Increased your reach by 6 inches. Either way.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of the history of these nice stadiums and the history of the ball clubs, is there anything that Walsall is historically known for? I mean, we've got, third oldest club. Walsall, do they have a unique history?
I want to say yes, but I'm not so sure they've done that much that's spectacular. Like I said, that cup run that got into the semi-finals sort of stands out a bit for me. And likewise, Wrexham's rivalry with them, even though it's only an hour and a half, maybe a bit less than that away, but I wouldn't describe it as a sort of fervent rivalry. We played them quite a lot. But I don't really recall any clashes with us either that have been particularly memorable as such. I remember some sort of satisfying wins, but not enough to really make things a bit spicy. I remember, well, actually, I just to say if you don't mind, on the subject of that, I mean, if you look at our head-to-head record, we were much better. I think we've won 28, they've won 22, something like that. But recently, and admittedly, this is maybe skewed by the fact that we were in decline when we were in the Football League playing them. They've had much the better of it. We've only, I think it's 1 in the last 7 we've won against Walsall.
Oh wow!
So we need to try and make that right. We last did the double against them. So you win home and away in the league, and that's called the double. And we last did the double against them back in '95, and that was one that was very satisfying because it was at Walsall's ground. I think it might have been the first time we played at their new ground actually, and they were winning 1-0. And in the closing moments of the game, Wrexham got a penalty. And Carl Connolly, a real iconic legend of the club, magnificent player, stepped up and scored. So we've equalised right at the end of the game. But then from the restart, we managed to get the ball forwards and win a corner. And we swung it in. And Barry Hunter, one of our centre-backs, a very good player, headed it in. And so we went from losing in the last minute to winning the match.
Wow.
Doesn't happen that often. And in those days, they didn't add as much added time either. Now we're seeing massive amounts of time added on, but then they didn't. So we somehow managed to go bang, bang, 1-2 and won it. So, but that was more just like a memorable win. It wasn't something that really fostered it. Oh, I've just remembered another. That was Walsall, wasn't it? Hang on a sec. Oh, I've just remembered a very memorable Walsall game, actually. How poor of me to not recall it.
Go on.
We you know what? I want to quickly get it on my spreadsheet to make sure that I'm not completely wrong about this. Because if I'm dreaming this, it'll be a huge disappointment because I really enjoyed it at the time. We played at Walsall, I'm certain. Here we are. Oh, I was right. I can't believe I forgot that. February 2001. So we've brought in an interesting bloke who you may have seen playing for Wrexham in the soccer tournament, Lee Trundle.
Yeah.
The big guy up front, everyone was bouncing off, yeah? Now, we bring him in. He's in his mid-20s, and no professional team has taken a proper punt on him. And when you see him playing, he's playing for Rill in the Welsh leagues. And when you see him playing, you think, why on earth haven't people gone for him? And we were sniffing around him. Rill's only a mile away on the North Wales coast, an hour away, rather. And we weren't certain, but we did take a go on him in the end. He made his debut in midweek at Rotherham in Yorkshire. We lost 2-0. He came on as a sub, didn't really get much involvement. And then we play at Walsall the next Saturday. And I can't believe that I've forgotten about this, because this is one of the great Wrexham away days. It really, really is. So we go there. Walsall are going well. We're not. They score a goal in the 14th minute, so we're losing. 20 minutes later, they score again. We're 2-0 down at half-time. We have not been at the races at all. But in the second half, Trundle suddenly comes to life. So an hour into the game, he scores an outrageous overhead kick from the edge of the penalty area. An amazing goal. So it's 2-1. Then another icon of the club, Kevin Russell, gets the ball on the edge of the area and hits a terrific shot in 20 minutes left. It's 2-2. And then in the last minute, Trundle gets the ball on the halfway line and sets off on this fabulous twisting run down the right-hand side, beats a couple of players, slides the ball across the goal, and one of our substitutes, who was a decent striker, Craig Falconbridge, slides in and just about makes it at the far post and gets a touch on it and knock it into the empty net. So we've come back and won 3-2. And Trundle then set off on the most remarkable little spell of games where you sort of thought, okay, something's gone wrong here. This guy clearly should not be playing at our level, but let's make the most of it. He scores another goal the next game. We beat Northampton 3-0. We're getting some momentum going now. We play Oxford at home in another remarkable game. They score 3 goals, but we score 5 because Trundle scores the most remarkable hat-trick of goals. One of them was just a sharp, tight-angle finish. Good goal. Another one is a shot with the outside of his foot, which is really difficult, which loops over the goalkeeper. And the third one is a shot from almost the halfway line. Astonishing. And you're thinking, this guy's a legend. We win at Cambridge the next match. Lee Trundle scores again. We were losing 2-0 in that as well and come back and win 3-2. And then we win in the Welsh Cup, that was a straightforward game. And then we play Reading at home, and Reading are really strong. And you're thinking, we've got up to 10th place now with this amazing Trundle boosted performance. And we're thinking, oh, yeah, we're going to be okay. Reading are much better, and they seem to work Trundle out. They go ahead. Trundle does equalise, but they pretty much control them, and they get a late winner. And Trundle, weirdly, sort of faded then, in all honesty. I'm just having a look here at the figures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 league games after that, and he only scores 1 goal. And it sort of continued a bit like that for him. He continues to be a good player, but that early blast of talent didn't quite seem to be there. Oddly, after he left us, it reappeared at higher levels. So he played for teams like Swansea and was a real, I think the words used is baller. All the tricks of coming out, his amazing goals he scored. He would do it occasionally for us. He was a good player for us, please don't get me wrong. But he actually, his greatest moment in a way was his last season. He and Andy Morrell, who I mentioned before, they were the front two. And he actually worked very hard as Morrell's support man. Morrell was top scorer in the entire country. And Trundle, I think, got about 12, but he was, more the support man doing the hard work, which is amazing when you look at his talent. But fair play to him to devote himself to that role.
That's incredible.
That was a memorable Walsall win, I can tell you.
Yeah, I didn't know. John Wick, someone killed his dog. Batman, someone killed his parents. I didn't know for Lee Trundle's origin story, he just needed to face Walsall.
Yeah, I think that's essentially
set him off.
I think that was what kick-started it.
Yeah, bring him back, for this match, and then that is amazing.
I know that when we were unsure about him, Joey Jones went to scout him, and I understand that the reservation he had about him, because he's playing for Rill, like I said, it's a much lower level of football, and he's clearly too good. And his reservation was, it's like a school game. Schools playing against each other, and you got one lad who's just much better than everyone else, and he just wants to do everything. And obviously in professional sport, you have to learn that you have to fit into a system. But Trundle would be going around taking all the throw-ins, taking all the free kicks, no matter where they were on the pitch, taking goal kicks, apparently. Now, he's a striker. no, you don't do that. But it was like he was better than everyone else, and he knew it, and he was just trying to take control of everything. And I think Joe Jones felt that's not probably going to, when you get up to a bit higher level, that's not going to work. But yeah, to be fair, he has a special talent, and he was able to, I think we gave him a good apprenticeship, not just in letting him showcase his talent, but also showing how by working for the team, he would, he became a better player again.
We have people like Trundle, Morel, obviously a lot of great players with a history. Is there current players or historical players for Walsall that are large names that we should know about?
The one that comes to mind, although it would be unfair for me to say that Walsall's what he's known for, is Paul Merson. And Merson is, he's on TV quite a lot now as a pundit, but he was a really talented player for Arsenal in the late 80s and into the 90s, played for England as well. And in fact, without realising it, you may well have seen him, because if you've seen the highlights of the Wrexham Arsenal game where we beat Arsenal, he sets up the Arsenal goal really skillfully. He goes past his man. He's very one-footed, but he could dribble brilliantly with that 1 foot. Trundle was very left-footed, for example, but Merson was a bit like that. But sometimes players adapt. Like I said before, hitting it with the outside of your foot and having proper control of it is difficult. But Merson could do it. And he could run, as you'll see if you look at that goal. He's right-footed. He runs at decent speed with the ball almost tied to the outside of his foot. It's lovely technique. And then he sort of dumps Sandy Thackeray, who was our fullback, on his backside, and then goes round the outside of Mark Sartori, our centre-back, and then with, again, the wrong foot, because you'd sort of think he'd hit this with your left foot, but he prods with his right foot. And Alan Smith, the striker, can't miss. Now, he went to Walsall as a player manager. And, oh gosh, I remember a game, I think only played against us once for Walsall, but they won 1-0 at the Racecourse. And he just dictated the game. It was beautiful to watch. He was just, even though he was older now and wasn't as mobile as he used to be, but his ability to strike the ball with the outside of his right foot, made him like a 2-footed player. And he was really, he would just drift around it because he had the intelligence to pick up little areas of space that the others hadn't seen. And when they gave him the ball, he could drop it where he wanted to. And it was a real lovely masterclass. I mean, he's interesting as well because he had a lot of personal problems at his peak. He had major problems with alcohol and gambling. And he went through a real sort of collapse at the time of playing, but managed to recover and has been a really, I think, positive voice, really, an advocate for getting support for people with alcohol and gambling issues. Ironically, well, maybe not ironically, maybe it was the culture of the club. Another very higher profile player, Tony Adams, who was Arsenal's captain, England's captain, and wonderfully made the mistake that let Wrexham score the winner. But he had very similar issues, which could have been utterly horrific, because he crashed his car while drunk into a bus stop outside the school and was arrested. And he had to go to rehab. And he now has also been a really powerful voice in trying to support people. And I think he got a stake in a clinic, I think I'm right in saying, which supports players, or even owns it outright, which supports players and gives them, sort of like opportunities to recover and to piece together their lives. So 2 people who are very, I think, impressive in terms of what they've done for others. And Merson did play for Walsall, but I wouldn't say he's massively associated with them, although he was their manager. They had a player called Craig Shakespeare, which I always liked.
Yeah, he has a writer's name.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I reckon. Yeah. And then the obvious one from Wrexham's point of view, and really this name dominates the relationship between Wrexham and Walsall, is Dean Keats. Keats was a legendary player for them, played for them for a long, long time. He's from Walsall. He has got one of the most indecipherable Black Country accents. Please look up a Dean Keats interview on Wrexham's YouTube channel. You won't be disappointed. The thing with him is he was quite a thick accent, but he had real sort of machine gun style delivery. So he talks really quickly. I'll attempt it, but I can't do him anywhere near enough justice. He also would always talk about people being in the building. Like if he bought a player or this player was available, he's in the building, and he'd be like, "Yeah, right, we did a job now. He's in the building." And it's like, what do you say there? I love, nice man. I know him pretty well. He's a good bloke. He's a very good bloke. Now the thing is, he was a legend for Walsall in the Football League, and then came at the end of his playing career to Wrexham in the National League, and was one of the greatest Wrexham players in the National League as well. A real captain. Talented footballer, again quite one-footed, left-footed. He'd play in the sort of the deeper midfield role, if you will. He was hard, he's only a very little bloke actually, but I tell you what, he'd go in hard on people. He was tough, and also was a intelligent passer of the ball, and an intelligent reader of the game. You see some players like this sometimes. They've just got these sort of street smarts, and they can receive the ball and they'll know that something should be happening over there, and they just bang that ball into the correct area and make things happen. And he read the game really well. Wrexham fans loved him because he was a good player, loved him for his commitment. He memorably we were playing against Newport, and we'd used our 3 substitutes, and he was fouled, landed on his arm and broke his collarbone. So we're down to 10 men. He went down the tunnel. 5 minutes later, he came out with his arm in a sling and finished the game. It was 0-0 the game, but the 2 best chances were created by him near the end, playing one-armed and still floating these lovely left-footed passes. So he was a fabulous player for us. I mean, really, really a good player. He was captain when we won at Wembley, the first time we played at Wembley against Grimsby, and then he retired. But he was then appointed about a year and a half later as manager. And we used to call them caretaker managers. He tends to call them interim managers now. Firstly, I think the idea was he'd step in while they looked for a new manager, but he'd inherited a bad team that could have got relegated, and he did a very good job of tightening it up. He's always very well connected. He knew lots of people in football, and he used those connections to bring in some really savvy signings. And he also really handled, and for a new manager, this was very impressive. He handled the system well, so that even though we had these transfer windows, we weren't allowed to buy and sell players. He managed to bring players in by finding loopholes, legitimate loopholes, but players of quality. And he managed as well to get rid of all the rubbish. He was astonishingly good at that,
Wow.
And so we had a much better team. The fans were excited, I think, that he'd managed to stabilise. And that summer was quite memorable. But that'd be 2017, I think. The fans are really behind the team. And we did a big fundraising thing where, just a bit called Build the Budget, because we didn't have that much money. But I think people had faith in Keats. And so we raised lots. I think it was about 50,000, I think, to add to the budget for buying players. And Keats put together a strong team. The issue maybe with it was brilliant defensively, maybe lacked a little bit of creativity, but he brought players in the January to improve it. We were up there in contention for promotion. And then with 10 games left, we played Chester at home and we beat them. It was 2-0. It was one of those games, could have been 5 or 6. We were totally different class. But Keats had an offer from Walsall to take over. Now, Walsall, like I said, are his local club, the team he supports, and his dream really was to manage Walsall. So we had a tricky situation. We're in the running. He's got the dream job offered to him. It took quite a while to decide, but ultimately he went to Walsall. Now, my personal opinion, and the opinion of some of the fans, is, he's got a difficult, he's stuck between the devil and deep blue sea. He's got to try and make a decision one way or the other. My understanding is he decided to stay, but his father, who was also died in the World War, was saying about, it's once in a life, it might never happen, and it sort of convinced him that he would go to Walsall. We fell to pieces. I think we only won 1 of the last 10 games, didn't even get in the playoffs, whereas at the time we were quite close to the top of the table when he left. He didn't save Walsall from relegation. They dropped down to League Two, and he didn't succeed the next season, and he was sacked about halfway through it. So he regretted going. And then we brought him back in, And this was interesting. I thought it was a brilliant move. A lot of fans didn't. A lot of fans didn't like it. They felt he'd betrayed us. I don't think that, you know. And having spoken to him, I don't. He's not that sort of bloke. But a lot of people didn't want to forgive him. And that was the team that was on the first season of Welcome to Wrexham. He came in again with Wrexham looking like we could drop out of the National League, and he steadied the situation. And then he again was quite savvy in the transfer market and brought in on very small budget, brought in a decent team, which, as you saw in Welcome to Wrexham, basically we were in the playoffs all season, and then we dropped out on the final day, only drawing at Dagenham. And you know, we're the new owners by then, but they weren't able to free the funds to help him out, really, to bring players in, which was a shame. Because please don't get me wrong, I think I'm set here now, and yeah, absolutely, to bring Phil Parkes in was an outstanding idea. I think Keats knew he was bound to go if he didn't take them up, but I think he would have done well with the funding as well. At the time, I felt really sad that he'd been removed, because I thought Keats would make the most of this, you know, the level head. But having said that as well, like, some fans just couldn't forgive him, so it was a, you know, difficult situation in some ways. But yeah, he sort of looms over the Wrexham Walsall. He's the big shared link between the two clubs, I would say.
And that brings a lot of good perspective, because in the series, you see this quick, fast, and it almost seems a rush to judgment to sack the gaffer and get rid of him and get rid of Dean Keats. And that brings so much more context to why people would have been quick to rush already outside of the context. Because you have Rob and Ryan coming in that can induce some money into the system, the potential to get new players. And it was kind of odd to see the fan base and the supporters seem quick to turn on Keats. And not everybody, but yeah.
100%. I think a lot of them, in his first spell, when he, you know, I don't think you can argue that he did well. I don't see how you could put it any other way. But they did, as I said, lack creativity, but we never let goals in. You know, we were constantly keeping clean sheets. The fans were annoyed about that a bit then, but he was still getting good enough results to be a contender to win the league. Once he came back, they were determined to label him with that again. A lot of people just go with the cliche and don't bother looking at what's happening, you know. So the team that he had that season was much more attack-minded. We had some flaky games. We let goals in as a result. But we also, for example, Sutton United won the league that year. And we beat them 4-0 at the Racecourse. We absolutely tore them to pieces. We won 4-0 at Halifax. You know, there were a couple of away games where we scored in excess of 3 goals. We weren't a defence. And everyone kept saying, "Oh, they're so boring." And then they'd say he plays Keats ball, which is like being defensive and then just booting it up the pitch. I couldn't see that at all myself. But you know, I think if you set against somebody, and I please don't get me wrong, people have the right to feel let down by someone if they leave, and that's, you know, I don't subscribe to that. But a very vocal part of the support did, and so yeah, I think in that respect, you know, plenty of people in the fan base were quite happy to see him go. I think he would have been a less eager participant in Welcome to Wrexham, if I'm honest. You do notice you don't see him all that much, do you? And there's that scene when Humphrey Carr comes and speaks to the players and Keats, and Keats looks very uncomfortable with it, and then sort of closes the door afterwards almost with a look on his face like he's going to turn around and say to the players, "What the hell's going on here?" You know, and I think that was maybe partly his attitude to having cameras around. I don't think he'd have been an eager participant, to be honest. Whereas Parkinson seems totally open to it, doesn't he?
Yeah. I mean, which could have made for some good moments. You never know. But yeah, you bringing it forward into the history. And now I'm not sure. I didn't look up to see who is the manager right now for Walsall. That's obviously somebody who could have only been there for what, 3 years at the most, or 4 years?
Sorry. Oh, the current manager.
Yeah.
as he quickly looks on Wikipedia. It's Matt Sadler.
Hey, the Sadlers.
Who's Matt Sadler? He played. Oh, yeah, he's played in the Premier League for Birmingham. I do vaguely remember him. Bit of a journeyman's been around the block a few times. It's his first managerial job, and he was appointed this summer. So,
oh wow, okay.
So he's pretty new to the management game.
And name alone is they were looking for somebody Swift or somebody Sadler, and they found the Sadler.
Yeah. No, oh gosh, Sadler.
Yeah,
of course. Nominative determinism. That's called, isn't it? When your name determines your job.
Oh wow.
We of course had Arsene Wenger at Arsenal, but the best one, and I assure you, I'm not making this up, was the German team Wolfsburg had a manager called Wolfgang Wolf.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Mind you, equally no shadow of a lie. I when I did my driving test, I thought I'd really messed it up. I thought I'd made a right hash of it. And then at the end of it all, the guy says, "Thank you very much, Mr. Griffiths, you've passed." And I was pretty astonished. And then he signed the docket that I had to send off to get my license, and his name was Good Enough. And a driving tester who's called Good Enough. That's weird. I was looking for the hidden cameras, but turns out he was legit.
I'm glad it went that direction instead of you found out that he was half lion and and the griffin roars its head.
Well, I mean, I'm just happy how it came out. I've just done a sneaky bit of research on Matt Sadler.
Okay. Sadler.
Because he was caretaker manager at Walsall at the end of the season. Then they sacked their manager. I'm just looking at their results now. They didn't have oh my gosh, they did not have the best running. Whoa, hold on whoa. Right. From the 14th of January, they only won one game until the end of April.
Wow.
That's not good. And so he got sacked. How patient were they? Wow. And so this guy came in for the last two games of last season. They drew 0-0 at Crawley, and then they beat Doncaster 2-1. And it seems on the back of the impression he's made from that, they've given him the job full time. So he was part-time manager, and now he's got the gig.
I think looking up some of their records, I think they had a higher losing streak than they did a winning streak, and could be wrong, but I think their longest home streak was 8 games, which makes our last season look absolutely incredible. To take that context in for what it was that we got to witness.
Do you mean they didn't win 7 in a row, did they?
At home, their at home win streak.
Oh, I see. Right, gotcha. Sorry, I was misunderstood then. I thought you meant streak in the sense of like consecutively. I'm just looking at the table now. 16th. They won 9 at home, but they lost 5, and they only won 3 away. Yeah, so mid-table, not that exciting, really. I mean, of course, I know in US sports, the sort of win-loss ratio, because draws aren't possible, is a better way of measuring the results, isn't it? But if you want to take it that way, at home, 9 wins, 5 losses, and away, 3 wins, 10 losses.
Ooh.
So,
yeah, that's rough. That's rough. And but that still landed them mid-table.
Yeah, they're 20 points off the playoffs, so well off that. But they're 12 points off the relegation at the bottom. So, close-ish to the bottom, closer to the bottom than the top, but probably not so close that you'd really be looking over your shoulder. Although with that horrible run that they had, throughout the season, the second part of the season, they must have been wondering, wasn't they?
Well, and I did my research as a good researcher does, just reading headlines and not the actual article or story. And one of the ones that I saw is Walsall supporters, once known as the moaning losers,
really?
Something about turning their tide or changing their history. So I don't know if that's a biased article. It was in the Atlantic. I'm not sure the history in that, but that mid-table not winning, possible losing streak, I don't know how embedded that is into their history if they've only been to, and I say that, but I mean, going into the league is a big thing, being into second division as their highest. And I think they didn't quite make it to Wembley ever. And maybe just the semifinals was it.
Yeah. That I'm aware of anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to say that accusation of them being moaners, all football fans, certainly in Britain, are fatalistic moaners. It's got to be said. Having said that, I some people would say that the sort of Midlands or the Birmingham stereotype is to be a little bit morose sometimes. I don't think that's fair at all. But
Okay.
some people would say throw that accusation at them. But well, that's not nice, is it? Bless them.
Yeah. I mean, it read as on the exterior all the potential to be a biased hit piece, but of course, me being an excellent researcher did not read it, so you take that as what you will. Speaking of Birmingham and the surrounding area, we are not viewed as rivals to them, correct?
No, not really. It's not that far away. I could say it's about an hour and a half by car. But no, I wouldn't say the rivalry quite drops that away from Wrexham.
The radius of rivalry. Yeah.
I mean, you can have illogical rivalries sometimes, which are about stuff that's happened between the clubs, more than geography. I suppose the famous current one is Brighton and Crystal Palace. Brighton's on the south coast, directly south of London. Crystal Palace in London. There's lots of clubs closer to Crystal Palace, but because of incidents that happened between the clubs, they see them as their big rivals. So that that sort of thing can happen. I would say, our rivalries are generally local. I say that. I mean, obviously, Notts County now I think would count as a major thing, but that's more
FL
a football
United.
thing.
Maybe,
yeah. But more probably just because of actual what happened on the pitch, which is that's a positive way to create a rivalry, isn't it? But Hereford, I would say, is the most distant sort of team that we've had a traditional sort of rivalry with. Hereford's, I think the reason for this, teams on the Welsh border, neighbours get on worse. So us and Chester are the big one. The fact that Wrexham can correctly say that part of Chester's grounds in Wales is a real sort of thing to throw at them, because they have a go at us for being Welsh, and we have a go at them because you're Welsh as well. And then going down the border, you've got Shrewsbury, which is quite close to the border. And we're comfortably the closest Welsh team. I'd say that's probably the second fiercest rivalry Wrexham have got. And then you go a bit further down, you've got Hereford. Now, Hereford is, a good couple of hours away by car, further than Walsall. But I would still say that's a rivalry because Hereford is close to the border, albeit the South Wales border more. And they used to let the teams on the border play in the Welsh Cup.
Oh, wow.
So we established a relationship with them through the Welsh Cup when they were in completely different leagues from us. And there's some edge to that game, although I would say possibly more from their perspective than ours. For us, we've got Crewe, who are pretty close, an hour away. We've got Tranmere, who are half an hour away. We've got other local teams, Port Vale, who we've developed a weirdly nasty sort of rivalry with off the pitch, which I can't quite understand. And I never used to think much of Port Vale. That's only about an hour away. It's essentially Stoke. But we have a really unpleasant relation with off the pitch. The troublemakers from either club seem to really look for each other. And I when I was a kid, that was Port Vale were just, frankly, rather dull, vanilla team who came and played us and so what. But Hereford always had a bit of edge. I always remember this is very unpleasant. This where when I was a teenager, Wrexham, we were getting crowds of between 1,000 and 2,000, and so we were desperately trying to get money in. And the big scheme was the university end, the tech end that Wrexham fans fill now. That was the away end supposed to be. But the other teams were only bringing 100 people or something like that. So they decided to have kids for £1, where children, unaccompanied children, I might add, could come, and the top tier was totally reserved for them. Where all the Wrexham fans go. That was totally reserved for them. And it kind of worked to get a couple of hundred kids up there, very high-pitched, Wrexham. And then astonishingly, Hereford's played us, and their hooligans, this is the 80s, hooligan times, climbed up from the bottom bit where the away fans were to attack the children. And as you can imagine, yeah, exactly. And as you can imagine, that was the end of kids for £1. But that was the 80s for you.
What in the world?
Yeah,
I will not understand that at all. To attack the kids in the kids section? That's...
Yeah. Well, I mean, how do you get into the mentality of an idiot who goes to a football match ever finds anyway? I suppose is my honest answer to you.
Yeah.
In the 80s, it was really prevalent. It feels like it's coming back a bit, which is alarming. But, you know, I mean, the 80s, like now, time of depression, financial hardship, people getting their thrills in peculiar ways. And that's what worries me, that we're headed that way a bit again, really. But yeah, I mean, it was astonishing. I remember, I may have said this to you, please cut me off if I have. I remember a Wrexham Chester game in the 80s, and this lad jumped out of the Chester end, which is down the Wrexham end, and ran the length of the pitch and tried to get into the Kop, which was packed full of Wrexham fans. I remember just sitting on the side of the pitch watching this, thinking, what on earth is he hoping to achieve by getting into the Kop? You know, I mean, he did get as far as scaling the fence. He was definitely trying to get in. He wasn't just running around being an idiot. And the police pulled him off and took him into custody. And the local Wrexham paper interviewed him. You know, why not make a celebrity out of an idiot? And asked him, why did you do it? And he said, and I quote, because I wanted to get my head kicked in. Now, that's the mentality we're dealing with.
Yeah.
He'll see himself as a hero if he runs across the Wrexham pitch and then gets, you know, who knows, maybe life-changing injuries. But it'll all be worth it in his head because his mates will go, oh, you're hard, you are. Oh, well done.
Yeah.
That's the mentality of these people. And there's Wrexham people exactly the same. Please don't think I'm having a pop at Chester, sadly. This happens in football. This happens in life, doesn't it, you know?
Well, in speaking of those rivalries, do you know of any current rivalries for Walsall?
Now, they have a slight problem because their natural rivals are in higher divisions, naturally have a grander history. And so Walsall would see getting West Bromwich, Wolverhampton, Birmingham, Aston Villa, you know, the Birmingham teams, as their rivalries. But, you know, frankly, those teams probably wouldn't look at them in the same way because Aston Villa have Birmingham, you know? Wolves have West Brom, you know? So just thinking teams around them, and Kidderminster generally don't get up as high as them. Shrewsbury, as a pinch, probably about 45 minutes an hour between them. I'm not aware, though. I think Shrewsbury look more towards us. I think that Anglo-Welsh element makes them feel like that's the real rivalry. I'd have to ask a Shrewsbury or a Walsall fan to be sure, but I'm struggling. Yeah, the teams around Birmingham tend to be more top second-tier teams more, really.
Yeah, one-sided rivalries.
Yeah, so I think that might be. And that's, have I missed out on somebody in the Midlands? I'm trying to think. Not massively. No. And then because Birmingham's in the way, if you will, you know, Walsall's West Midlands, and then break comes into Birmingham. There's clubs around the other side of Birmingham, but Birmingham's in the way, if you will. You know, I think Walsall see themselves as Black Country or Birmingham in terms of geography, not East Midlands, where there would be some clubs, you know, maybe going down to Northampton or places like that. But yeah, I think having Birmingham in the way probably means they're not natural rivals. But I'm struggling to, I've probably missed somebody out, but I'm struggling to think of a proper sort of Black Country Birmingham rival for them that they'd play a lot.
Well, and I guess looking at the team now and who we're going to face, you said they finished 16th last season. Yeah, mid-table team. I'm not sure if they've done much transfers or player acquisitions or lost players. How do you feel going into the match against them?
Fairly confident. They've had a little bit of transfer churn, but I don't think anything dramatic either way. You look through their team, you're not really, for me, and to be fair, I don't follow the Football League as much as I used to when we were in the Football League before. Don't see that many names that you think, okay, there's someone to keep an eye on. Not trying to be insulting towards them. They've started the season pretty well. They lost in the 90th minute at Morecambe on the first game of the season, so they could have got an away point there. High scoring loss in the League Cup against Blackburn, who are a higher division team, 2 divisions higher, and then they won on Saturday. So, you know, they're certainly not to be sniffed at. They've got striker Danny Johnson, who's been around the block a few times, and he's scored in both the league games. But, you know, if we are what we feel we are, a side with real quality that's going to bounce up into League Two and then keep going, this, I think, a home game against a side that was in the bottom third last year and hasn't necessarily kicked on a lot, is a game you would want to win, really. Not saying we will, I'm not saying if we don't, or the season's over, but, you know, this feels like a sort of fixture. You look at it and you think, okay, yeah, if we're going to put our money where our mouth is. Let's start winning games here. We got an opportunity here, haven't we, with 2 home games on the trot. You know, after Saturday, we'll have played 4 league games and 3 of them are at home. And that's quite a nice little luxury to have. So we need to start getting points done, don't we, really?
So maybe Parky not so experimental with the lineup, maybe more of a play the more reliable players and not take a gamble with, I don't know, throwing McLean on the right versus the left or something like that.
I think it'll be similar to what we did on Saturday. I suspect that sort of core is what he's looking at the moment as his main lineup. It was really interesting, though, on Saturday to see us change to a variation of the formation that we've never played before under Parkinson. It was unusual. So I know you saw it anyway, but just to go through for anyone who didn't, we essentially had Palmer as a striker, sort of on his own. Usually we play 2 strikers. We'll have, let's say, Mullen and Palmer, or Palmer and Bickerstaff last against Wigan. And then Lee and McLean, as you say, were wide, but they were pushed quite high up. So they were really in attacking roles, trying to support Palmer. Clearly their primary function was to try to support Palmer and either set up or score goals. And then you had what we call a double pivot, where you've got O'Connor and Cannon, who are deeper in midfield, and they will not be so adventurous. They're like protection for the defence. He's never done that before. He usually plays 3 in midfield and then 2 up front. I'd be interested to see. At first, when he did it, I thought, okay, is this a tactic for an away game to be a little cautious? Because, you know, you could, in that sort of formation, you could really make the middle of the pitch very crowded and make it difficult for teams to get through you. But actually, he didn't. Because Lee and McLean, I don't think were expected to come back and help a defence an awful lot. So it was quite bold. So I think will he persist of that? I think he might do. Maybe. I don't know. Mind you, I thought Bickerstaff and Jones would be playing in that on Saturday because they doing their places. So what do I know? You know, if those 2 wide players have been a little deeper, it's something that's become tactically fashionable in football recently called a box midfield.
Okay.
But then that idea is that, you know, you got 4 players in a box. So the double pivot, the defensive ones, Cannon and O'Connor, at the bottom of the box. And then up at the top are Lee and McLean. And you see, if they're a bit closer together, I would call it a box midfield. And I would say that makes us very compact through the middle. So teams are going to have to come around the sides and try and get at us. And then if they can get past our wide players, we would back ourselves to defend the penalty area well. That's the sort of game plan. If you play that system, force it all out wide, and then if they put it in, we've got good centre-backs, they'll deal with the crosses. That's a very basic summary of what you'd be looking to do. But like I said, I mean, they were a bit more attack-minded, McLean and Lee, than I think I'd have thought it in that traditional box formation, if you will. You've got to be careful with formations. I mean, I am banging on. Ultimately, players have roles, and those roles will have certain responsibilities, and they need to know the other players' responsibilities, and it needs really to be coherent so that you have parts of the pitch covered, if you will. But ultimately, people lay a bit too much. Well, not put this way. Talking about 4-4-2 or box midfields are convenient hangers on which to convey your idea, to hang the idea on. 1-4-4-2 could be very different from another, depending on the type of players you put in and those roles, if you will. So 2 teams could look like they play exactly the same, but actually there's a lot of subtlety within it. And what I'm talking about here, I mean, let's be honest, it's maybe 10 yards difference in a way to expect those players, McLean and Lee, to be between being a box midfielder and then being wide attackers. It's not quite as simple as that. But it's an overview, but, you know.
Well,
don't take anything I say seriously.
I do. It's gospel. It's gospel from the cult leader himself.
For what it's worth, I like our usual shape because it looks really well grooved. Players know what everyone else is going to do. You know, you can sometimes play that pass when you're not quite sure if you're under pressure, but you know that person should be there.
What would we be looking for then against Walsall? Are we looking to see if Lee and McLean are dropping more back into defense than, you know, something may have changed from Parky's last formation, or if they're playing more attacking and more up front?
Well, as a major generalization, if we stick with the same team and they're deeper, Lee and McLean, something's gone wrong because they've clearly Parkinson's using them as attacking players. And if we're at home, we're going to look to win. And well, it's fair, Parkinson does anyway. But, you know, if they are having to drop deeper and deeper, it is meaning that they're having to help our midfield because we can't get a grip of the game. So I know that's a massive generalization, and there'll be different phases of the game where you have to adjust, and don't listen to people who say, oh, they had two strikers. Now they brought one of them off for a midfielder. So that's defensive. It might be. It isn't necessarily. It depends on what other players are going to do, and as a response to that change. So, don't take me as gospel if you see Lee and McLean dropping off sometimes. It might be they drop off to give space for Barnett to run into that space and surprise the defence. But generally, if they are generally for prolonged periods playing much deeper, you got to look and think, okay, is Palmer isolated now? Is he all on his own, fighting his own little battle and then hoping people will come to support him? If that's happening, it's gone wrong. But it would be interesting. I'd love to see Bickerstaff given a shot. I mean, don't get me wrong, in Parky I trust, but Bickerstaff's done ever so well, and I think he deserves a chance, to continue to show that.
Would you be so bold as to have a prediction?
I think it'll definitely get darker as the evening goes on, and the floodlights will come into play. That's my prediction.
It will be a game. It will be a game.
I'll tell you why, or partly why. Years and years ago, Andy Gilpin, you'll know from Fearless and Devotion, top bloke, he was the Wrexham Mail's sports writer, and he asked me to take part in a thing called the League of Gentlemen, which was 4 of us, and we were all predicting Wrexham's score for that Saturday, and then they had like a league to show who was doing best. Now, at the time, they put me down because the hospital radio commentary I was doing was funded by the Supporters Association, not the Trust, a different organisation, wonderful people. And so they put me down as Mark Griffiths, Wrexham Supporters Association. And I thought, you know what? It's going to look really bad if the bloke with the label Wrexham Supporters Association is predicting that we're going to lose. I feel like I'd be bringing the association into disrepute. So I never predicted a loss all season. Last season, that would have worked, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
We didn't. We finished at low mid-table, and I took an absolute bath on, no, we'll draw this impossible away game against a team of superstars. Yeah, I got absolutely slaughtered. So, yeah, I'm reluctant to give predictions. And anyway, one team could be much better than the other, and then I get 2 players sent off in the first minute, and everything's out the window. That's my other excuse.
Well, and I'll steal the Humphrey Carr prediction let me drop some names, when I got to ask him in person. And we're going to do fine. We'll do fine.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, he wasn't wrong.
And I'm definitely a victim of, and, put your money where your mouth is. I made the prediction with Bill, and I set a win, being positive, here's a win. And then I do this betting app that's not real money. You just bet coins. But I put a draw 0-0 for the last match. And I guess the realism, when it's like, all right, now actually put somewhat of a wager on here. It's like, well, I could see this as a draw. However, like you with the, supporters group behind you, well, I probably should say this is going to be a win. At least 1-0, I should probably say. Yeah. Definitely.
I'm afraid gambling doesn't really. I have no gambling roots in my family. My dad never bet on anything except the Grand National, and so yeah. Don't ever take betting tips off me.
Oh well, and this isn't real money. They just give you a set of coins each day, so no stakes on it.
The Grand National, which was a massive cultural event in Britain, going back for God knows how many years. The big horse race in Liverpool in Aintree. And weird Wrexham story related to that was that we played against Peterborough. Now, was it Birmingham? It might have been Birmingham. Anyway, it was one of the clubs managed by Barry Fry, who was a right character, a real sort of Cockney East End geezer. And the Grand National usually starts at 3:40. And his team, I think it was Birmingham, not Peterborough, they were there playing at Racecourse. And I was told afterwards by incredulous Wrexham staff that he left the bench on the sides of the pitch, the manager's dugout, at about 35 minutes into the game, and walked up into the director's box and watched the Grand National. So he missed the end of the first half, didn't speak to his team at half time, and missed the start of the second half because he wanted to see if his horse won on the Grand National.
Wow.
Now, he was the sort of guy who, A, would do that genuinely, but B, would also do that maybe for people to notice him as well, I've got to say. But yeah, I mean, I'd be livid if my manager took my team's games so lightly, but yeah, that's what he did.
Oh, geez. Well, I couldn't imagine the documentary crew.
That'd be gold, wouldn't it?
Yeah, being able to. I'm going up. Don't follow me. Nothing to see up here. Nothing to see.
Yeah, that's it. No, that's incredible, isn't it? He was a peculiar bloke. Actually, I remember me bumping into him before the match, and I think he had a real desire for everyone to go, "Ooh, look, that's Barry Fry." I think he liked being noticed. And there's actually a documentary showing him with his Peterborough team, and I think it's on YouTube somewhere. It was made in the 90s. It's a hell of a watch. It's a half-hour show. It actually features Wrexham knocking them out of the FA Cup, and a real big win for Wrexham. Yeah, it's on 97 it was. And they show him at half-time just swearing at his players and going crazy. Parkinson, that's nothing compared to Fry.
Oh.
But there's at the start of that game, like I said, this desire for attention he had. I was walking down the players' tunnel and it was pouring down, and I had a big golf umbrella, and he was walking the other way, and I'm thinking, oh, there's Barry Fry, he's famous. But obviously, I'm going to embarrass myself. I go, hello, Barry. And he's just going to walk straight past me like anybody would, who doesn't know me. But he couldn't, because he wanted some reaction, and he just walked up and he looked at me and golf umbrella. And I said, yes, it is. And then he carried on. He just needed, everyone's got knowledge it was him. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that's nice. But it was.
You know who I am, right?
I think that's what it was going on, I think. Yeah. But famously, when he went to Birmingham, they had a terrible home record. They'd been doing badly, and he went to the manager of Birmingham. And he then came out early on in his time at Birmingham, gave a press conference in which he said that he found out that the ground had been cursed. That's why they were playing badly. And so he consulted with people who know about such things, and he took the curse off the ground by walking around the pitch at midnight and urinating on all the corner flags.
That's
football.
That makes sense to me. I don't
absolutely.
If it was any other way, I would have questioned him.
Yes, that's it. If you haven't got a urine-soaked corner flag, you're in trouble.
If I can, I guess, summarize what I've learned, Walsall, not too memorable. Very old club. They had an old grounds, moved to a new ground that is part renovated, maybe, where part of it is higher that you can see from the M6. And they also have not got too high in the football league, haven't dropped too low, so kind of just stayed where they're at, where I guess, average is fine. And not too much of a storied history to pass with outstanding players that most people would have seen, I guess, in the Premier League or other leagues like that. They're kind of mid-table team, don't really ruffle too many people's feathers. That not too many people have them on their radar, and I would imagine our fans are going to be somewhat welcome. That it's not a big rivalry between us, so maybe not the firms going against each other or something like that.
You're a very good student. Right? I 100% agree. Yeah, I wouldn't consider. You certainly wouldn't think this is a game that the police will have to be bringing in people on overtime for, really. Although, having said that, it's not far away. So I'd like to think they'll bring the 1,000+ numbers which Milton Keynes and Wigan did. So there should be good atmosphere. I would like to think they've sell out the away end and make a bit of noise, but hopefully we don't give them too much reason to make much noise.
Oh yeah, and with that, Mark, thank you for teaching me how to Wrexham today, the Walsall way. As always, I am a sponge. You are the teacher. I am the grasshopper. You are the sensei. Thank you so much. Hopefully, this is the first of Mark and many Mark appearances to come. I was told as well, that if people have any questions, feel free to send them in that they would like me to ask people. So either put them into the comments or just directly send them to me. You can find Mark on Twitter at I just put in Disney's Mark Griffiths, but
M_Griffiths 92.
Griffiths, or just tune into the games. Both of those. Wonderful hashtag #AskWrexham community that Mark has fostered and cultivated and grew that surrounds him. This has been lovely. Thank you for spending your time. And we are all honored to have your presence.
You so much. Thank you. I've had a whale of a time. It was absolutely brilliant. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
You are welcome. This has been Ran. That has been Mark. I have copied their outro. Up the town.
Very nice. Welcome to Wrexham.
Welcome, player.